Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar, The Precautionary Principle, What's in it for you? My name is Michelle Dixon, and I am the Program and Development Director for Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition, and I want to thank you for joining us. I am pleased to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Carlos Sonneschein. In addition to his long tenure as a professor at Tufts University School of Medicine, Dr. Sonneschein is a fellow at the Centre Cavaillé at École Normale Supérieure in Paris and a visiting professor at the University of Ulster. For over 4 decades, Dr. Sonnenschein's research interests have centered on the control of cell proliferation by estrogens and androgens, the impact of endocrine disruptors on organogenesis and the reproductive function, and carcinogenesis during early development and adult life. Dr. Sonneschein, we welcome you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all of you. I'm happy to have the opportunity to discuss with you the subject of the precautionary principle. To start, I will give you a rather brief summary of what the precautionary principle is about, although I assume that some, or at least most of you, perhaps know quite a bit about it. And then I will answer questions you may have about the subject. I like this to be a shared experience where the subject and its implications be discussed openly and in the most candid fashion. As you probably are aware, the precautionary principle is unfortunately a controversial issue. It shouldn't have been. It shouldn't be because of the socio-political implications. I hope that at the end of the webinar, we both learn something about the precautionary principle in a shared dialogue or colloquium. Okay, so what I am going to show you next is what is that is understood as a precautionary principle. In the case of serious of irreversible threats to the health of humans or the ecosystem, acknowledged scientific uncertainty should not be used as a reason to postpone preventive measures. The precautionary principle is a new version of what historically has been principles in epidemiology that prevent, if possible, the occurrence of maladies. And so the history of the precautionary principle goes back at least 2 centuries. Now, just to be more specific about what the precautionary principle proposes, I have a number of bullet points that you can see on your screen that indicates that the precautionary principle addresses uncertain risk by switching from reaction to precaution. That is to say, instead of acting as a result of something that already is happening, it would be better if we prevent this from happening to start with. It also provides a framework for protecting humans, other species, and life-sustaining ecological systems now and in the future. That is to say that the precautionary principle is not something that will prevent us from having something tomorrow morning, but something that will assure civilization, let's say, a safe future. It clarifies, in order to do that, it clarifies the role of environmental science in policymaking. In addition to diagnose environmental hazards, it aims at identifying, developing, and assessing safer alternatives to potentially harmful ones. There is no uniform recommendation for applying precaution. This is precisely one of the controversial aspects of the subject, because a number of people consider that the risk that we are running just by being alive, some of them are acceptable, some are part of what it is impossible to prevent, and others are preventable. And therefore, there are alternatives, and a lot of discussion has gone on regarding this subject. And one of the things that the precautionary principle proposes is to reduce, remove, or replace harmful or suspected harmful environmental hazards. I have capitalized education because this is precisely what I believe could convince all audiences and all stakeholders to take in their hands the possibility of managing these measures. And in an ultimate analysis, the precautionary principle, of course, aims at enhancing the quality of life for you, your family, the societies, and the environmental niches we all share on Earth. To succeed, it requires the intellectual input of us all, and that is important. In other words, what I am trying to include here, and what others have done for decades, is to convince all of us that we have to participate in executing what the precautionary principle proposes. Now, there are some central components, and this is a little bit repetitious of what I just described for you, but I try to be as pointed as possible. And according to some people that I will later on give references to, the four central components are to take preventive action in the face of uncertainty, to shift the burden of proofs to the proponents of an activity that is being introduced into the environment, explore a wide range of alternatives to possible harmful actions, and to increase public participation in decision making, which is coming back to the latter point I made in the previous slide. I just want to make add to this short presentation two comments by European public officials who already over a decade ago proposed and exposed in very clear terms what we are, let's say, facing and what is that we are supposed to do in facing those problems. In the Bergen process, wrote Ms. Brundtland, who was the leader of the opposition in Norway, and then she became the Prime Minister of Norway. In the Bergen process, there has been an important debate on the principle of precaution. I will add my strong support to those who say that we cannot delay action until all scientific facts are on our tables. We already know enough to start to act and to act more forcefully. We know the time it takes from decision through implementation to practical effects. We know that it costs more to repair environmental damage than to prevent it. If we err in our decisions affecting the future of our children and our planet, let us err on the side of caution. I think that this is a very compelling message that public officials should take all over the world. Unfortunately, we are going through times in which some of our elected officials have no idea about what is going on, and therefore forget all the things that Ms. Brundtland proposed over a decade ago. And finally, well, there is, okay, there was another quote that apparently was eliminated in the process. I just wanted to make available to you a publication by the World Health Organization Regional Office for Europe that is opening in, I mean, it's working in Copenhagen, Denmark, that is called the Precautionary Principle, Protecting Public Health, the Environment, and the Future of Our Children, which was edited by Marco Martuzzi and Joel Tickner, who probably some of you know or heard about. He was here at the University of Massachusetts at Lowell, and he participated on all this movement to enact the precautionary principle by the World Health Organization. This volume has a number of articles that explore very important aspects of this, from the history up to the specifics of how to propose this and educate the public about it. So I suggest that those of you who are interested in exploring or amplifying their knowledge and views on the subject, try to get this publication. I think it's very useful. I think that that covers most of the things that I wanted to say to start a discussion, and I welcome all of you to ask questions, and I will try to answer them based on my own experience on the subject, as Michelle outlined at the beginning. I don't know all the details, but some of them I knew and I know, and I welcome your questions. I don't know.
Yes. Okay. So I think we have our first one has come in. And the question is, in your opinion, why do we need the precautionary principle now? In what areas do you see it being of greatest concern?
Well, the precautionary principle is aimed, as I outlined in the slides that I presented to you, aim at preventing catastrophes of all kinds. And obviously, the world is a very complex let's say, planet. There are countries in which there is a lot of affluence. There are countries that are very poor, and there are countries that are in the middle. The issue is that we cannot escape, despite of what some people, this is of course a personal view, we are bound to remain here on Earth, and instead of spending money trying to see whether we can make a war from space, I think that that kind of money could be well invested in preventing and following the principles of the precautionary ideas that have been proposed. And the latest one is obviously centered on what the Paris Agreement was supposed to do. Unfortunately, the United States is withdrawing from the Paris Agreement, and that is a very sad development. As I said, there are many subjects that can be dealt with. Some of them are, let's say, centered on affluent countries like United States and Europe and the East Asia countries. There are countries where the problem is much more acute than in the United States, like in China. And those of you who may have had the opportunity to travel could attest that is the case. And then there is the problem of the so-called countries that are not as affluent, that also have their own specific problems. I would say that it's easier for us to work locally to solve the problems that we have, and expect that the World Health Organization or the United Nations would try to improve conditions in the other countries that are far from our local interests or geographically removed from where we live. The subjects are, of course, the one that I am more familiar with is the endocrine disruptors. But as you probably are aware, those of you who are here in Massachusetts, global warming is something that affects us all and affects a number of subjects that the precautionary principle should be applied to. I don't know if I can be more specific, but perhaps somebody could ask more specific questions. I will try to address them.
I do have a follow-up from someone who says, as you imply, applying the benefits of research progress brings both benefits and risks. Risks are often known and unknown. How does the precautionary principle address future unknown risks?
Well, the future unknown risks, I don't know specifically what is that the meaning of that. We have risk now that we can address and that we can put our technology to resolve. The air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the conditions under which we grow the food that we eat can be improved. I personally am impressed by something that, for example, the organic movement that I thought was going nowhere until recently. I saw that things are moving and people are selecting, and I assume that this is part of the educational process that I think is so important for people to understand that this is, we have to deal with problems that we are facing here. And I hope that the organic movement will expand and will not be something that countries consider that only those that are affluent can afford. Everything relates to everything in our biological world, and from an evolutionary perspective, things have to be dealt with in a global way. At least that is my view. Regarding future problems, I don't know. I mean, one can be very cynical about what's going on, and on the other hand, I learned that the problem is that not everyone is following the money, that there are honest people who are interested in their children having a future, a good future, a livable future. So we have to follow those who have shown to us that are worth following. And they are leaders who we should keep in mind in order to put them in positions of power to exercise that power for the benefit of the whole community. So I urge everyone to enter in this campaign of education and to practice as well the precautionary principle in their local communities and try to convince others that it's worth doing. We are
Well, I
going.
think that leads. Oh, my apologies for interrupting. I was going to say, I think this leads nicely into the next question, which is how does someone move into this educational arena to bring others in their community into the light, for lack of a better term? You know, you look at all of the products that are on our shelves today, and wouldn't you agree, most consumers assume that those products are safe. So where does someone begin, is the question.
Well, I think that is a very interesting question, because all of us are facing that problem. We always assume that what we consume has gone through a process of regulation by authorities that know what is that we should not eat or we should not tolerate in our daily consumption of food. The issue, as usual, is that sometimes we are misled into believing that we have safe food and water, and in fact we are not. The thing is that in a society like ours, where money or financial considerations are so important, I mean, all of us are part of this society. We have to try to manage or at least balance the interest of people to pursue what the Constitution calls pursue happiness, with the trying to maintain a modicum of rational thinking in how to achieve that goal. I always, as I said, I always think that there are people out there who care very little about the environment. The issue is that these are people who have family, who have relatives, who have people who they appreciate, and we cannot escape whatever is happening to all of us. Therefore, the electoral project that one tries to favor should consider candidates that expressly say that they are concerned with what's going on. I trust the judgment of people to select, under normal circumstances, to select representatives that are concerned with the environment. The process of education, in my view, will widen this interest on the part of people to elect people who are concerned with the environment. But we have to even ask whoever is running for office what is their views regarding this subject. So this is what I would say is an effective way to put in positions of power people who can be convinced that it is a good investment to invest in the environment and in the future of generations that are going to be healthy and facing increasing challenges. Populations are expanding. People are moving. The reason people are moving and migrating is not because they enjoy doing it. If you ask people who are moving, some of them pay with their lives. So it's moving or migrating, and I was one of them myself, requires decisions that are not necessarily um, easy. When people move, is because they are running away from bad situations. And I think that if we improve the situation of the southern hemisphere, migrations will not be as catastrophic as they are these days, because these people are desperate. Not only because they don't have probably some things to eat, but they are in environments that are absolutely intolerable. So yes, I insist that we have to start where we live, but we have to have this idea that this is a big village, and we have to take care of everyone. If not, eventually it's going to touch us in one way or another.
And as a follow-up, do you see a movement taking place on a national level with regards to some of the activism, some of the push for policy that you're speaking about? And
well, I am happy to see that there are young people who are concerned with this problem, and that is very important. We have, for a decade, probably more, we have been hosting students from high schools in the Long Island region that came to our laboratory to see what is that we were doing regarding environmental science. And in turn, they participated in their local communities of what they learned here. And from what we learned, they became committed to pursue these ideas. So I am, let's say, optimistic that if young people start moving in that direction, eventually this will convince others that the problem is solvable, or at least we can improve the conditions under which we are living here and elsewhere. So once again, I capitalize education because that is the best card we have for winning this protracted battle.
And I have a question here from someone who asks, given all of the regulations that are currently in existence in the U.S., what do you say to someone who argues, well, we have regulations in place, isn't that putting the principle in action?
Well, yeah, of course, we have laws. Some of them are not applied, therefore they are not effective. There are regulations. The issue is what is the decision that authorities have to manage properly those regulations. Unfortunately, if you are familiar with what's going on in the regulatory area in the United States and even in Europe, industry has been not very helpful in trying to help. On the, I mean, it's a mixed bag. There are people who understand that change is coming, and they are anticipating the change wherever they can. Then there are people who by their decisions, imply that regulations are not necessary, that the public will decide whether to buy this product against this other product, and that would be enough. The issue is that, unfortunately, not everyone is educated to make a rational decision. For that reason, at least in my humble opinion, the regulatory environment is unfortunately managed by people who have the resources, I mean financial resources, to move public opinion in one direction or another. And the last election, I think, was in a way a reflection of this state of affairs. Not, I mean, of course, it is a subjective way of looking at the topic, but in my view, the electorate voted against their own interest. But that is, again, is my view of the issue. The solution, I mean, just declaring that people vote against their own interests is not enough. What I think is going to help is that people are going to be offered the opportunity to live a healthy life. That is the important thing. And whether it comes by education or by imposition, quote unquote, by authorities, I think that that is important. The issue, in my view, is that by educating people, in turn, these educated people will request that change will happen. Nobody takes change very easily because it requires a lot of adjustments in our life that some of us, at least in my view, some of us, not everyone, considers not very easy to do. Unfortunately, the more people we have in our planet, I have the impression that the choices are going to get narrower and narrower. The more we do locally and internationally to improve things will be to the benefit of everyone, and the change will not be as traumatic as probably it could be.
And someone asked, do you see a country that is an example to follow?
Well, when I travel mostly to Europe, I see that one of the, I mean, first of all, as a scientist, specifically as a cell biologist and as a biologist in general, I see no difference between or among people. We are all have a genome, a DNA that doesn't vary very much, and by looking at it, we cannot identify who comes from where and why, contrary to what you may hear. Now, at the same time, we, by associating and having a history, we have societies that are more, let's say, developed than others. I see the Scandinavian countries as having a maturity and a sense of what is the common good somewhat better than, I'm talking about societies, not people, okay, not individuals. As a society, and I quoted the Norwegians in this case in my presentation, I think that they are willing to sacrifice the common good in order for everyone to have a better standard of living. Unfortunately, for a number of reasons, the Soviet Union is not a great place where things are happening. I think that from the environmental point of view, what I am told and what I've seen is almost a disaster. The same is true. I've been in China, and what I saw then, about 10 years ago, is not paradise as far as environment is concerned. I read that they are taking this very seriously, and that things are improving, which I applaud because it also benefits us. I mean, after all, we import from China a number of things that we consume, and depending on what are their standards, will benefit or not from that exchange. The same is true of other countries in Europe. I mean, I see that there are some decisions that are, I would like them to be adopted here regarding transportation, for example. I mean, developing railroads, I think, has been a boom for Europe. And if you go to Europe, you use them, and it is a popular way of traveling. There are not as many cars. Unfortunately, not everyone follows. I see that the big cars are being bought in Europe the same way they are being bought here, because the fuel is less expensive. I don't approve of that, but it is beyond my control and the control of even the regulatory offices of environmental affairs in Europe. So there is no perfect society. There are societies in which certain things are better than others. That's all.
Thank you. I will open it up to a few more questions. If there's others you want to ask, please type them in now. Okay, then I'm going to say, Dr. Sonneschein, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us today.
I appreciate the invitation, and I'm glad that I can contribute with my limited experience to improve the education of others, and on and on and on, so everyone will benefit. And thank you again, Michelle, and the Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition. Thank you again.
Well, we thank you so much, and we thank everyone for taking time out of their day to join us. And on behalf of Cheryl Osimo, NBCC's Executive Director, and our Board of Directors, I thank you and wish you all a good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Bye.